He let his father die alone in his heart while she demanded he choose, then showed her true self at the worst moment. She gave him an ultimatum. Cut off your parents, or we are done. Not because his parents had done anything criminal. Not because there was abuse or danger. Simply because she did not like them, and she needed him to prove she came first. And he tried. He actually tried. He bent himself in half for over a year, went to therapy, changed therapists when she objected to the gender of his first one, sat through couples sessions, and still every single attempt he made was not enough. But none of that is the moment this story turns dark. The moment this story turns dark is when his father died, and within 1 hour of him sitting with his grieving mother, she texted him, "I can't believe you'd rather be with your mom than with me." That sentence. That one sentence tells you everything you need to know about who this woman really was. Let us go back to the beginning, because this story did not start with a tragedy. It started with what seemed like a relationship problem that a lot of couples face, which is navigating different levels of closeness with each other's families. His girlfriend had a problem with his parents. She felt they were too involved, too opinionated, too present. And in the early days, that might have seemed like something that could be worked through with patience and conversation. Couples deal with in-law tension all the time. It is one of the most common sources of conflict in long-term relationships. You can picture the kinds of arguments that probably came first: the offhand comments about a holiday dinner that went too long, a phone call she overheard that she felt excluded from, a moment where she looked at him laughing with his mother and felt something she could not quite name but could not quite let go of either. So on the surface, this looked like a fixable thing. It looked like a communication problem. It looked like something therapy and time could smooth out. That is the version of this story he probably told himself when he first agreed to her demands, and honestly, that is a very human thing to believe. It is the story most of us would tell ourselves, because the alternative, that the person you love is asking something of you that cannot be fixed and should not be met, is too painful to accept right away. But here is where things get complicated very quickly. Her demand was not, "I need some space from your parents." Her demand was not, "Can we set some limits on how often we all spend time together?" Her demand was binary. Either he cut off his parents entirely, or the relationship was over. There was no middle ground offered, no gradual adjustment, no collaborative problem-solving. It was a full removal of his family from his life, presented as the only acceptable solution. And when he pushed back, when he tried to find any kind of compromise, she escalated. She said he could see them once a year. 30 minutes at a time. For parents who lived 20 minutes away. Parents he loved. Parents who had done nothing wrong. Think about what that actually looks like in practice. 20 minutes down the road, and he was being rationed to half an hour, once a year, as though his parents were an inconvenient habit he needed to wean himself off of rather than two people who raised him and loved him and were still very much alive and present and hoping to be part of his life. Here is what gets me. He actually agreed to try. He moved out briefly to make a point, but when her father got involved and suggested he hide his contact with his parents to ease the tension, he came back and did exactly that. He secretly called them once every week or two. He visited them when he could. And he felt ashamed about it. He felt ashamed for maintaining a relationship with his own mother and father. Let that sink in for a second. This man was sneaking around to talk to his parents like it was something illegal, ducking into another room to make a phone call, keeping his voice low, checking over his shoulder in his own life, because the alternative was losing the woman he loved. That is the kind of psychological pressure that warps your sense of what is normal over time. It does not happen all at once. It happens gradually, in small increments, until the distorted version of reality starts to feel like the only version that exists. That is what happens when someone convinces you that loving your family is a betrayal of your partner. And the therapy journey in this story is honestly its own kind of heartbreak. He started individual therapy, which was the right move, a healthy move, a sign that he was taking the situation seriously and wanted to understand his own role in the conflict. He was probably sitting in that first session feeling cautiously hopeful, the way you do when you have finally decided to ask for help and you believe that help might actually arrive. But his first therapist was a woman, and his girlfriend could not tolerate that. Not because of anything that happened in those sessions. Not because of any breach of trust or concerning disclosure. Simply because the therapist was a woman, and that fact alone was enough to make her demand he find someone else. So he switched. He found a male therapist, because even his access to mental health support had to pass through her approval. His healing was conditional. His growth had to occur within the boundaries she set. Then he asked repeatedly for couples therapy, and she refused because according to her, they were fine. Fine. A relationship where she had already forced him out of his apartment once, where she had issued ultimatums about his family, where he was secretly hiding phone calls to his own parents, where he was changing therapists on her request. That was, by her definition, fine. When they finally did start couples therapy together, the therapist asked her directly how it felt when he contacted his parents. And her answer was remarkable in how honest it was. She said it felt like a heavy rock in her body. She said she hated him most when he did it and loved him most when he did not. And I want to be very clear that I am not dismissing her emotional experience. Whatever she felt was real to her. That physical sensation of dread or rage or abandonment, whatever it was genuinely happening inside her. Emotions are not chosen. But emotions are also not excuses to control another person's relationships with their family. Feeling something intensely does not give you the right to use that feeling as a weapon to isolate your partner from the people they love. You can feel a heavy rock in your chest and still choose not to make that rock your partner's prison. The topic of borderline personality disorder came up during his individual therapy, not as a diagnosis of her, but as a possible framework for understanding why she experienced emotions so intensely and so differently. He researched it thoroughly. He listened to podcasts during his commute, read books with highlighted passages and dog-eared pages, stayed up late working through frameworks that might explain why the woman he loved seemed to experience his family as an existential threat. He tried to understand what might be driving her behavior. Not to excuse it. Not to dismiss it. But because he genuinely wanted to find a way through. He wanted to understand her inner world well enough to build a bridge to it. He was willing to do the emotional labor of understanding her pain even while she was causing him pain. That is an extraordinary level of empathy to extend to someone who was simultaneously demanding you abandon your parents. And in a different story, in a story where both people were doing that kind of work, it might have been enough. And then February came. His phone rang early in the morning. His mother. Paramedics were resuscitating his father. Come home. He called his girlfriend first. She said go if it is an emergency. He drove over with his mind in pieces, hands probably gripping the wheel too tight, running every red light in his head, bargaining with something invisible the way you do when you are not ready to arrive at the thing you are driving toward. His father did not make it. And in the hours that followed, he did what any person would do. He stayed with his mother. He stayed with the woman who had just lost her husband of however many decades, who was probably still standing in the same room where the paramedics had been, not entirely sure yet what to do with her hands or her mourning or the rest of her life. He sat with his family in one of the worst moments any of them had ever faced. He was exactly where a son is supposed to be. He had been there about an hour when she messaged him. "Are you still there?" He said yes, he would probably stay the night with his mom. And her response started cold, then became something else entirely. "I can't believe you'd rather be with your mom than with me. You need your mommy. I am going to need everyone to stop and really sit with that for a moment." His father had just died. The body was barely cold. And she was angry that he was not coming home to comfort her. She was jealous of a grieving widow. She looked at a son holding space for his mother on the worst day of both their lives and decided that this moment, was the one where she needed to be chosen. She turned the death of his father into a moment about her feelings. And whatever shred of hope he might have been holding on to, whatever belief that maybe things could still be different, whatever love was still carrying him through the weight of all those compromises, I imagine it died somewhere in that moment too. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just quietly, like something that had been struggling for a long time finally going still. He did not invite her to the funeral. He tried to help her parents understand her emotional patterns by recommending a book. He stayed in therapy. He kept showing up, even after everything. And eventually, quietly, the relationship ended. He lost his father and his relationship in the same season. But here is the thing he said, and it matters. He said he felt stronger than ever. He said he did not regret secretly maintaining contact with his parents. Because that secret contact gave him a relationship worth grieving, worth protecting. It gave him something real to hold on to when everything else fell apart. Now let us talk about what this story actually was, because I think it is important to name it clearly. This was a slow, sustained attempt to isolate someone from their family under the cover of relationship needs. Whether or not that was conscious, whether or not it came from a place of deep emotional pain rather than calculated manipulation, the effect was the same. He was being systematically separated from his support system, his sense of self, and his ability to make autonomous decisions about his own relationships. The demands escalated over time. The compromises were never enough. And any attempt he made to establish independence was met with punishment, withdrawal, or renewed ultimatums. The fact that he stayed as long as he did, tried as hard as he did, and still managed to maintain his integrity throughout, speaks to something genuinely admirable in his character. Most people would have either fully given in or left much earlier. He stayed in that difficult middle space, trying to find something that worked, until the situation itself made the answer undeniable. So here is where I land on this. This relationship was never going to get better. Not because love was absent. Not because effort was absent. But because one person's emotional needs had expanded to the point where another person's humanity had no room to exist. You cannot love someone into healing if their healing requires your complete surrender. You cannot compromise your way to peace if the other person defines peace as your total compliance. And you absolutely cannot build a life with someone who looks at your father's death as a competition for your attention. He made the right call. Not just in leaving, but in refusing to let shame cut him off from his parents entirely. Those secret phone calls, those stolen visits, they were not betrayal. They were survival. They were the lifeline that kept him connected to who he actually was underneath all the pressure and the guilt and the longing to make things work. And in the end, that connection is what gave him somewhere to grieve, someone to sit with, a relationship that was real when he needed it most. Walking away from someone you love is never clean. It is never painless. But sometimes it is the only act of self-preservation that remains. He chose himself. He chose his family. He chose reality over a version of love that had conditions too narrow to live inside. And the fact that he can now say he feels stronger, even through grief, even through loss, tells you everything about whether he made the right choice. 5 years, a ring sizing, and he still cannot explain why marriage is just a piece of paper to him. She is moving out. She has already started packing her things. 5 years of her life, a year of premarital therapy, 4 sessions of a second round of couples therapy, 1 ring sizing appointment that never led to a ring, and she is done. She is not here asking for a reason to stay, she already knows she has to go. She is just trying to understand what on earth he was actually saying all those years, because none of it has ever added up, and she would like to hate him a little less while they share the same house for the next 2 weeks. That setup alone should tell you something about the kind of woman she is. She is not melting down. She is not begging. She is sitting in the wreckage of 5 years and trying to find intellectual clarity so she can move forward with some peace. She is folding sweaters and wrapping picture frames and doing the quiet mechanical work of dismantling a shared life, and somewhere in the middle of all of that she is also trying to make sense of a story that never quite added up. That is not weakness. That is someone who has already done the hard part and is now just looking for the last piece to click into place. Let us walk through this timeline slowly, because every stage of it reveals something important. They went on one date, just one, and marriage came up. She was transparent about it from the very first conversation. She wanted to get married at some point in her life. She was not demanding a proposal on the first date. She was not issuing ultimatums before they had even ordered food. She was simply being honest about who she was and what she wanted from a long-term relationship, the kind of honest that takes courage because it risks scaring someone off before they have even had a chance to know you. And he said he was open to marriage. Not enthusiastic, not planning, but open. She took that as enough to move forward. Most people would. 3 years passed. 3 years of building a life together, of growing into each other, of learning each other's rhythms and flaws and quiet habits, of figuring out what kind of future they were constructing side by side. 3 years is not a short stretch of time. It is long enough to know someone deeply, long enough to have survived disagreements and hard seasons and the ordinary grind of daily life. And at year 3 she brought it up again, which was completely reasonable. They were doing well. He had even asked her to move in, which is a significant commitment, a choice that says I want your coffee cup next to mine every morning and your shoes by my front door every night. It signals that he saw a future with her. And yet when she raised the subject of marriage he said he needed time. He said he did not understand the concept of marriage. After 3 years together and one conversation on the very first date where he told her he was open to it. That phrase, I do not understand the concept of marriage, is doing a lot of heavy lifting here. Marriage is not a quantum physics equation. It is not a philosophical paradox that requires years of contemplation. It is a legal and personal commitment between two people who want to build a life together. And here is the part that makes this particular version of confusion so hard to accept. He said he could see himself being with her forever. He wanted to have kids with her. He wanted the farm they had talked about, the specific dream they had built together in late-night conversations, the kind of dream that only gets shared when you believe in someone completely. He wanted all the substance of a life built together. He just did not want to call it marriage. He just did not want to sign the paper. And he was willing to let her leave over that, over something he himself called meaningless. That contradiction is the entire story right there. She gave him the benefit of the doubt and agreed to premarital therapy. 12 months of it. She was against it from the beginning because she correctly identified that it felt like stalling, but she showed up anyway, week after week, sitting across from a therapist and trying to help him excavate whatever was buried under all that vague resistance. She invested not just time but emotional energy, the kind of sustained hope that quietly costs you something every single session when the answer keeps not coming. And at the end of 12 months his conclusion was still that he had no idea what marriage was or why he should do it. A year. For that answer. At year 4 she hit a wall, which is completely understandable, because by this point she had been patient in a way that went far beyond what most people would have managed. The daily fights that followed were not her being irrational. They were the natural result of someone whose needs had been deferred and deprioritized for years, someone who had watched the goalpost move again and again while her partner continued to claim he saw a future with her, continued to say all the right things about love and forever while doing none of the things that would actually secure it. Then he took her to get sized for a ring. He took her to an actual jewelry store, walked through the door with her, watched her slip rings onto her finger, watched her find her size, and let her walk out of there with the quiet, cautious, fragile belief that something was finally happening. That this was the beginning of something concrete. She calmed down. She waited. She trusted the gesture because what else do you do when someone takes you to a jewelry store? A whole year passed and nothing happened. Instead of a proposal he suggested a different form of couples therapy, this time to understand why he did not like the idea of marriage. 4 sessions. He spent 4 hours spread across 4 sessions in therapy explaining that he just does not understand it. 4 hours to arrive back at the exact same place they started. And she finally said enough, packed her things, and started the exit. She should have probably started much sooner. And yet somehow you cannot blame her for not leaving earlier, because hope is a powerful thing and he kept feeding it to her just enough to keep her in place. Hope is not stupidity. It is just the very human tendency to believe that the person who says they love you is telling the full truth. Here is the part one keep coming back to. He is willing to lose her. He told her she is the love of his life. He wants a forever with her. He wants children and a farm and a shared future. He has painted this entire picture of what their life together could look like, detailed and warm and specific, the kind of future that does not get described in vague terms by someone who is not genuinely attached. And he is letting her pack her bags over something he himself describes as meaningless, as just a piece of paper. If it is truly meaningless to him, then why not do it for the person he claims to love more than anyone? What is the cost of a meaningless thing? Why is he protecting himself from something he says has no value? There are a few possible answers, and none of them are particularly flattering. One possibility is that he is genuinely commitment phobic at a level that goes deeper than marriage specifically. It is not that he objects to the institution. It is that the finality of it, the public declaration, the legal permanence, triggers something in him that he cannot articulate and perhaps has never been willing to genuinely examine. The 2 years of therapy he participated in, all those hours, produced no real insight. Which suggests that either he was not actually engaging honestly in those sessions, or that whatever the root of his resistance is, he is not ready or willing to look at it directly. Another possibility is that he simply does not want to marry her specifically, but lacks the self-awareness or the courage to say that out loud. Saying I do not understand marriage is easier than saying I do not want to marry you. It puts the problem outside himself, makes it philosophical rather than personal, and avoids the kind of direct conversation that would force both of them to face something much harder and much more specific. This version is painful to consider, but it is also the version that would explain why years of therapy produced nothing. You cannot therapy your way to clarity you are actively avoiding. A third possibility is that he has been using her desire for marriage as a management tool without fully realizing it. Every time she reached her limit, he offered something. Premarital therapy. A ring sizing. More couples therapy. Each offering was just enough to reset her patience, to buy more time, to keep things stable without actually resolving anything. Not necessarily malicious, but deeply unfair. What she deserves to hear is this. His inability or unwillingness to commit is not a reflection of her worth. She was clear, consistent, patient, and honest from the very first date. She gave him every possible opportunity to meet her where she was. She went to therapy she did not want to attend. She waded through a ring sizing that led nowhere. She extended grace and hope long past the point where most people would have walked. The failure here belongs to him, whether it comes from fear, avoidance, or a mismatch he has never been honest about. The logic he is operating on simply does not hold. You cannot claim something is meaningless and then guard it so fiercely that you let a 5-year relationship end rather than do it. Those two positions cannot both be true. Either marriage means something to him, in which case he should be willing to discuss that honestly, or it truly means nothing to him, in which case he should have been able to do it for her without blinking. The fact that he could not do either reveals that there is something in this equation he has never told her and possibly has never told himself. She is making the right move. Not because marriage is the only valid goal in a relationship, but because she was honest about what she wanted from the very beginning and she deserved a partner who could be equally honest back. Instead, she got 5 years of ambiguity dressed up as philosophical confusion. She got a ring sizing with no ring. She got a man who said she was the love of his life and still let her walk out the door. She does not need to hate him. But she does not need to understand him either. Some people are simply not capable of giving you what you need, and no amount of therapy or waiting or hope will change that. She asked if his logic makes sense to anyone on the planet, and the honest answer is that it does not need to make sense. It just needs to be over. And it is. And she is going to be okay. Actually, she is going to be more than okay. She is already gone in every way that matters. The packing is just paperwork. Drop a comment below letting me know which story hit harder, and if you have been here before, give this video a like and subscribe so you never miss one.